Without further ado, I'd like to bring up our first speaker. Sarah Strachan is she's the Group Manager of Adoption and Commercialisation, looking after programs such as the Adoption, which is our extension program, MSA, and genetics. So she's going to give an overview of MLA and some of our investments that are currently underway. Thank you, Sarah.
Good morning, everybody. Really great to be here with you today. I guess in the theme of this event today, boosting your technical grunt, I wanted to open up this morning with a bit of an overview of the environment that we think at MLA that we see that we need to be thinking about. And as you would be all aware that the role of MLA is to invest levies from producer transactions, cattle, sheep and goats, into marketing our red meat here and around the world, but also into research and adoption initiatives that are going to help producers and our industry essentially make more money and become more profitable and sustainable. And so I just wanted to, it's a bit of a taster. We do so much within MLA, but I just really wanted to give you a bit of a taster, which I think links to the theme today, of things that might be a little bit disruptive that are coming, things that are happening quite quickly and things we're investing in because we think we need to stay ahead of where things are going. But first of all, I wanted to start with, I guess, the operating environment that we see that we're working in. The picture up here is actually, you might have seen this picture, I've been using it for a little while, but it's a real reality check of what consumers are thinking about when they're buying red meat. And this is a shopper in Italy, in an Italian supermarket, that's looking at what credentials the product that they're buying, their fresh food, is giving them. And so they're holding it up to a screen that's actually giving back to them information around nutrition, raising claims, the provenance story about that product. Now, it's not everybody in the world is demanding this, but it's certainly an emerging trend that people are looking for credentials and proven credentials behind the products that they're buying. And so the export demand, I guess we've been in an interesting environment where cattle prices have been record high, and that's been quite kept afloat. Even though we've had sort of low supply, we've been able to keep those prices quite high because our demand for our product in international markets has just been through the roof as well, and that we really haven't got enough product to supply the demand that's there, and it's going everywhere. And as you're probably well aware, over 70% of the red meat that we produce here in Australia is actually sent to other markets around the world. So because we don't have enough of that product to supply where all of those demands are, we get to be quite picky on where we want to play and where we find the people that actually can afford to pay for our product. We are one of the most expensive products, red meat products, in the world as well. And so the first instinct you'd think to go, well, where do we send our product? Where do we go and play in the world? And the first instinct will be, well, let's go where the people are. And so this picture up here is showing, well, where is the population growth? Where are all the people? But that's not necessarily where we need to send Australian red meat. Because we are a little bit more expensive compared to some of our competitors, we really need to go and find the people in the world that can afford our product. So we're looking for the households that have got an income of about US $35,000 is where we see the trigger point, is where they'll shift to buying and looking for products that sort of fit where our product sits. And that changes things. So you can see those bubbles shift pretty dramatically. We all of a sudden see where China was a big population area. There's definitely parts of that Chinese market where we send a lot of Australian product. But if we are looking for who can afford our product and where are they growing, it shifts quite a lot. And you can see that the EU, UK market and the US market sort of grow in size there as well. And so the EU in particular, and these are the markets, I should also say, that value those credentials that I was talking about. And the EU and the UK in particular, the sustainability credentials there and their emphasis on those credentials is growing as well. And so what's happening over in the EU and UK right now is some pretty exciting stuff for our industry, and that we've just negotiated the free trade agreement with the UK, which should be ratified or come into effect, we hope, by the change in our government slowed that a little, we hope by the end of this year. We've been limited in the UK and the EU for a very long time by a quota where we can only send a certain amount of product into those markets, but this is going to change everything. Very quickly, it opens up in volume. We can send a huge amount of volume or increased volume into these markets, and that will increase year on year over the next 10 years. And so that really does open up a huge new opportunity for us, but we need to be prepared for that because they'll be looking for product that is high quality, that is branded, and it carries credentials and has a story to tell as well, because that market also really does support their local product as well, and so we need to be able to be there against that. And we're in a good position to supply this because we're seeing now a real turnaround since the drought that we've been through in the last couple of years ago. We have seen things really shift, and we're going to be in a really great position to service these new and emerging opportunities. And we're seeing both the cattle herd and the sheep flock on the rebuild. And the way we keep an eye on that, and especially in cattle, is we keep an eye on how many females are coming forward to be processed. And if it's sitting at 47%, seems to be another trigger point. If 47% of our adult cattle slaughter is actually made up of females, we know we're in liquidation phase. But that's shifted, and it's shifted quite dramatically. So we're now in a rebuilding phase. In particular, the southern parts of Australia have definitely been more in a rebuilding phase more quickly than the north. But we're seeing both the herd numbers, flock numbers, and our slaughter numbers also on the rise, and forecasting those to get back to levels where they were previously in the next couple of years. So that's sort of the environment we're thinking about that we need to be working, that we are working in. So I wanted to give you a little bit of a taste of some of the initiatives that we've got in train right now that are shaking things up a little bit. And so firstly, I want to talk about the emphasis we're putting on adoption and helping producers and others up and down the supply chain to really grab the research outcomes that are coming out of MLA and other areas and turn them into things that you can actually implement in your business. And I think quite traditionally we would have done lots and lots of research, and we do the research and we get to the end of the research and think about, well, how will we get that adopted? Let's think about now how we disseminate that information, or how we get producers to do something differently. But we're changing that. And so now there's not really a research project that comes through MLA that hasn't got an adoption bit built into it. And so this is about building producers and advisors, which is an underpinning critical success factor to all of this, which is why we're increasing our initiatives with advisors as well, is that we're actually embedding producers into the projects. So at all times we're getting that producer input into whether the research is relevant, but they're also then being able to implement the research outcomes very quickly. And an example up here on the board is on the screen, is we're also then picking what are the big limiting or opportunities or big challenges that are facing our industry. And if we fix those and throw a lot of effort and resources to those, will really make a difference to our industry. And the example I have up here is we identified lamb survival. Or sheep, we've turned that into what we call a strategic partnership. The idea is there, we've framed up a big problem or opportunity is that if we can improve reproductive rates of sheep or reduce lamb mortality, we can make a huge difference to the profitability of our sector. And so we identify that as the opportunity, and then by strategic partnership, I mean we're then investing lots of research and adoption initiatives that tackle that one big challenge. And the adoption activities get built within these projects, but we also have got a journey or a road, if you like, that we take producers on or offer producers to come along and be a part of some of these adoption activities. And so what you're at today, Livestock Advisor Update, sits within our area what we call awareness activities. And that's the intent here is they are large scale, they capture a broad audience, and they're a bit of a taster of things that are emerging. And the idea would be that something here might trigger your interest, or at a meetup or a beef up event, a producer might be triggered by something that they hear, and they'll take the next step into our short-term training programs where they might invest in themselves by going to a 1 or 2 day, two-day workshop, so Edge Network, Bred Well, Fed Well, as an example. And from there, they might then take the next step into one of our long-term practice change programs. And it's at that end of the road that we are seeing the biggest impact financially in a benefit for producers. And so 2 products, if you like, that are there that you might be well aware of, are producer demonstration sites and profitable grazing systems. So both of those are really asking producers to commit to a long-term training or coaching program, if you like. And we are definitely seeing where this is where they're making more money. And then in producer demonstration sites, about 70% of all the producers that get involved in those actually permanently change and make a permanent change on their business and then scale it up across the rest of their business. Now, what's critical to making those successful is the role that you play as advisors. We actually don't get as much success in those types of programs without people like yourselves. Hence why we need you to be aware of all of this stuff, and we need more of you as well. I just wanted to touch on some of the things that we think could be quite a little bit disruptive, or things that are really shaking things up in the industry as well. And picked out genetics here as one of them. And so we're actually looking at, well, we've got projects, research investments right now that are looking at developing multi-breed genetic evaluations for cattle. Sheep already have that. Sheep already pretty much run a multi-breed evaluation where you can compare breeds with breeds, and you can't do that in cattle because each breed has its own genetic evaluation, which has worked extremely well and will continue to be there for the seed stock sector. When we're thinking about how we get broad-scale change and broad-scale use of genetics in decision-making by producers, this type of investment will be looking at where producers can be thinking, well, what's my productivity objective? Then I'll go and search for the animals that will fit that by having a breed versus breed or head-to-head comparison across breeds as well. So that's been a couple of years in train already, and it'll be just a couple of more years before we're able to have enough data to do that, and then we'll be looking to how we commercialise that. The other thing that's really shifting is the way that animals are being traded. And we've talked about value-based marketing for a long time, but we're actually seeing it happen right now. And it's very publicly known that, as an example, Gundagai meat processors in New South Wales have implemented a value-based pricing scheme based on how well that animal eats from an eating quality perspective, how much meat that provides, so the yield of that animal, and also what the animal health or disease and defect status of that animal was when it came to processing. And that's where that's been a really step forward, and it's potentially a risk that the processors are taking by putting that out there, moving away from traditional pricing schemes that have been largely driven by carcass weight, and really starting to reward and provide incentives for producers to be looking at carcass feedback and making changes that reflect better eating quality, better yield, and getting on top of disease and defects. What's helping unlock some of that and actually make that happen is it's been a long time coming that we've been investing in objective carcass technologies for about 20 years now, and it's all in this last sort of 12 to 18 months we've seen a number of these now become commercially available, and we're seeing processors start to implement them. And so what's for this, some examples of beef where we're looking at, we've got Meat Standards Australia right now, which I've been a part of for a long time, has had a really solid system of assessing carcasses for eating quality, all based though on trained humans on doing that. And so now technologies are coming in that will be an assistant to those humans to actually be taking those carcass quality assessments. And at the moment they're looking at how do we do what the human is doing right now, but we've got some technologies that are looking at, well, what are some new traits that the human eye can't see that might be able to help us talk about eating quality or predict eating quality even better. So as you can see, these are various different probes, cameras that are doing this job. And then we've got over here on the far corner here is an example of where we're using X-ray technology to help us tell about yield. And so when we combine, if we can know more about the fat, bone, muscle with an animal, and we know about the quality of the animal using these really robust and precise technologies, we can be quite precise in providing feedback to producers on the true value of an animal that they delivered. And this technology has just unlocked a really exciting opportunity, I believe, for the sheep industry. We've had Meat Standards Australia for a long time for sheep, for probably the last 10 years. And it's been quite a pathways process. So if you follow some really critical control points along the supply chain, we can be certain that the eating quality has been improved. But we've not been able to really specifically tell the quality of individual carcasses until now. And what we needed to be able to do that was a device that can measure intramuscular fat in sheep and lamb carcasses, and that has just happened in this last 12 months. We've got one commercially available device and more coming through the system right now that has unlocked our ability to, we've had a model or a program sitting in the background for some time now that can predict the eating quality of all the different cuts in a carcass by different cooking methods for lamb, which we've been able to do for beef for 20 years. But now that we've got this technology available, it's all happening for sheep too. So for all the benefits we've seen the beef industry get from Meat Standards Australia, I'm really excited that we're just about to see that start happening for the sheep industry as well. So just to, I guess, to go into what do we think the next big challenges might be that we are trying to get ahead of. And we've got some pretty ambitious goals, which have been set by the Red Meat 2030 industry strategic plan. But they're quite clear focus areas for us and things that we're saying, well, when we invest in something, does it help us achieve doubling the value of red meat sales coming out of this country? Does it make sure that we're the most trusted source of high quality protein in the world? Are we able to achieve carbon neutrality by 2030? And how are we going to double our investment or resources in adoption and help our industry make practice change? And so I'd say there's a whole section on becoming carbon neutral by 2030 today. So I won't labour on this too much, but it's an area that I'm also looking after now at MLA, and I think every second phone call I'm having or meeting at the moment is all about this area. It's quickly becoming a very busy area with lots of information coming at producers and probably to yourselves as advisors, and the need to navigate through that. So we set the goal of becoming carbon neutral by 2030 a few years ago now, it's probably 4 or 5 years ago, and we're well on track, we believe, to do that. And our industry's made great progress already on reducing methane emissions and so on. To date, we've been making sure we've invested probably nearly about $150 million in the research that we believe is required to come up with the new technologies that will help us get there. And we're now in the phase of, whilst that research is being completed, but want to help producers really get started on making some changes on farm that'll help us get towards this goal. Now that can be, there's lots of things that can happen right now with producers in improving productivity gains and efficiencies that'll all help contribute to this. So we don't have to wait until new technologies or supplements become available. We can get started on it right now. We've broken up the goal into 4 areas. In that industry leadership, which is exactly what this type of event forms part here, is how do we make sure that our trusted advisors in the industry have got the knowledge and skills that they need to help our producers. We've got the investments in how do we reduce greenhouse gas emissions. Now, most of those types of investments we've made in that area are around supplements. So you've probably heard about red asparaginopsis, the seaweed supplement, and then 3-NOP, which is a synthetic supplement. And we're looking at other opportunities in that area as well. And then carbon storage. So becoming carbon neutral is about a net zero statement. It's not about zero emissions. It's about how do we reduce greenhouse gas emissions and increase carbon storage so we end up with a net zero position overall. And so the investments in carbon storage is things like how do we increase the proportion of legumes, how do we use the role of trees and so on in that space. And then integrated management systems is how do we support all of this with all the accounting systems that we need to measure the changes that we're making. And so that's also an area that is quickly being filled with lots of different accounting methodologies. And so we're really trying to help find some consistencies there that will match with the national greenhouse inventory as well. And I guess we keep getting market indicators that we really do need to be pushing along pretty quickly in this space because the market is telling us that they're looking for, again, credentials around things like your carbon status or carbon footprint, sustainability status, and so on. So these are examples of already brands that are in the marketplace that are making claims around that, and legitimately because there's a process that does accredit these. But we've also had a project recently with a Western Australian stakeholder that showed us that 1 in 4 consumers are willing to pay 15% more for a product that has these types of claims on it. So the consumer insights are there, and that's one thing we keep an eye on is will the consumer pay more for something? Because I'm a strong believer that until someone right down the end, the consumer, who's the only person that does put money into our supply chain, until they're willing to pay more for something differently, that's really the lever to help us drive change further down the supply chain. I just did want to touch on, I guess, for the goal of how do we make sure we're the most trusted source of high quality protein in the world. Probably what comes to mind right now in the last few months is how do we ensure our biosecurity is second to none. And so that might be something you're having lots of conversations about with your clients as well. And so obviously foot and mouth and lumpy skin disease are pretty red hot topics at the moment. They certainly consume a lot of our time at MLA, and it's probably just worth touching on that. So MLA's role in this as a research development corporation is to support government. We sit on a task force as well, and I'll show you some initiatives we have been able to get going as an RDC. But there is a really strong plan in place that if something might happen, we're very well equipped to activate that plan pretty quickly, managed by Animal Health Australia. It's called the AusVet plan, and it's quite well documented if you were to jump online and want to check that out. But the things that we can do as MLA on behalf of producers is that we have been pretty active in Indonesia in the last little while. In the area in particular of vaccines, we're making sure that every Australian animal that might arrive in Indonesia is being vaccinated. We're working within Indonesia with local communities to get their animals vaccinated as well. And that's quite an effort because a lot of landholders there might only have 1 to 2 animals. So it's quite difficult to make that happen quickly. But that's why we've also got, we're supporting them with portable yards to try and be able to do this more quickly and go to where those cattle are. And so we have got a number of projects that are trying to quickly develop vaccines for both foot and mouth and for lumpy skin disease as well. And then quickly, I like to finish with this one because I think it's a bit novel and I think it's a bit interesting, is that idea of how do we get more from less? While our herd and flocks are going to be increasing, they're not going to explode and double in population anytime soon. So how do we actually double the value of the red meat coming out of this country? We can produce more, sure, but how do we actually try and take product that might be worth $10 a kilogram right now and turn that into $100 a kilogram? So some really novel things that are happening, but they actually are commercial as well. And so the picture on the far left here is a whole bunch of cattle hides. We're working with some companies that can extract the collagen out of hides and pelts. And apparently the collagen out of Australian livestock is really high quality grade. If you're into all of that, there's lots of, you see collagen. I take more notice now, I think, and everything's, lots of, in the health section, there's collagen written everywhere. But so it's a real market. It's billions of dollars, especially in the US. And so this is happening now, is that we've got companies commercialising, taking collagen out of these and turning them into nutraceuticals and so on. And then down the other end, we've got that pet food market that's largely been untapped and just is that is an area where we can take something that might have been a $10 a kilogram topside and quickly turn it into a premium pet food that becomes $100. And it's an area where people are really willing to pay a lot of money for premium pet foods. And there's lots of stuff happening in this area, thinking about where do we put red meat in the market where you don't normally see that. Think about delis where the ham takes place, or the barbecue chook section where that chicken dominates, and really looking for novel places where we can put red meat where it wouldn't have been before. So I'm just going to finish there, and I don't know if we have got time for questions. Yes? Thank you. A couple of questions? Okay. But hopefully that's giving you a little bit of a taste of the things that we think might change things a bit.
Any questions?
Hi. Is that better? Right, sorry. I was interested when you were talking about the quality assurance and the types of technology used to measure that, and I just wondered how that information was getting back to the producer and what were the mechanisms around if there were improvements that they could make on farm, if MLA is supporting them to get that kind of support for those as well.
Yeah, sure. So there's been ever since MSA has been around, there's been producers have got access to pretty extensive carcass feedback on every single carcass that's graded. For every carcass graded, there's about 20 different measurements that are then collected, and the producers have access to that. Within that MSA, we've got My MSA, which is a carcass feedback portal, if you like, where within that there's benchmarking tools and a whole bunch of reporting tools as well, which help identify trends, peaks and troughs through the year where compliance might have been an issue and so on. The technologies themselves, because at the moment they're sort of replacing the human assessment part of it, but the outcome is exactly the same. So the use of technology on a producer carcass feedback sheet won't be really obvious, because if the human was measuring marbling, the camera's measuring the same marbling and producing the same figure. So the reports will still be the same, and the feedback is very accessible to producers. As technology evolves, and we might start picking up traits that we have not assessed in the past, yeah, that's where we'll start to see some different measurements become available. Yep. Okay, good one. Thank you, Keely.